Then Jeff, but this is all about free speech, and now the Supreme Court has said that.
It's all about free speech, and it's all about them being able to force crisis pregnancy centers to speak the speech of the abortion industry. That's what they want to do, and that's what this law does. And that's why we've got to, stay with this. And these laws are popping up all over the place, Jay, in cities and states, basically where you have a sort of a left-wing majority. They are passing these laws all across the country. We've beaten them in New York at the Second Circuit. They've lost in the Fourth Circuit. They've passed a law in Hawaii that we're also in court challenging, and that will be largely determined by what happens in this case, too. But that's why we have to keep fighting these things.
So, Jeff, let's, I like to predict these, but they're always difficult to predict, but I feel like the court granted this to reverse.
I completely agree, Jay. I think we have an excellent chance of the Supreme Court ruling in favor of free speech here, and I'm cautiously optimistic of a unanimous decision here in favor of free speech. The reason why I say that is that, while the abortion distortion doctrine corrupts everything in its wake, there have been times, such as the McCullen decision a few years back, where the Supreme Court unanimously struck down Massachusetts' abortion buffer zone. So free speech trumped abortion in that case, and I'm confident that we're going to get a unanimous decision like that McCullen decision, where free speech trumps abortion again.
Listen, if you get 5, it's a win. I'll be thrilled with 9. 5 is great, but the abortion distortion factor is a factor.
Yeah, Jeff took the words out of my mouth. We all understand this. When we look at any of these cases, let me tell you something. Take pro-life, take pregnancy centers, take all that out of it. Just read what this text would mean. A organization would be forced by the state to promote something that the organization is against. Okay, and they'd have to promote that. If you take abortion out, that is a 9-0 win. I don't even think you'd make it to the Supreme Court. But see, the abortion distortion worked all the way up to the Supreme Court on behalf of Planned Parenthood. Now, not everywhere, even out of New York, as Frank said, where still very pro-abortion judicial judges, they weren't okay with this. But they got into California, which is always 20 years ahead of everybody on the left, and they found, and I really do believe these judges used abortion distortion to justify this. This had nothing, for them it had nothing to do with the First Amendment. They ignored that because they put abortion above. It's what we say. Abortion is their cause for existence. It is what they worship, this specific area of the law, and so it can trump everything. Now, in my view, at the Supreme Court, you don't get the same abortion distortion, especially on a First Amendment case. But
hopefully not. But I'm actually very confident. I'm very confident. Jeff and Frank, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Sure thing, Jay.
Next stage is the writing of the amicus brief, friend of the court. You'll be able to participate in that. We'll have details on that in the days ahead. All right, we're taking your calls, 1-800-684-3110. Later in the broadcast, we're going to talk about some UN resolutions coming on Israel, also the president's trip to Asia. That'll be in the back half hour of the broadcast. But in the meantime, we'll take your calls at 1-800-684-3110. Don't forget to support the work of the ACLJ. We're in a matching challenge campaign. You could do that at aclj.org. That's aclj.org. Any amount you donate, we get a matching gift for it. If you need legal help, just go to our requests line right there on the homepage of the website, aclj.org, right there. If you need help in your community, it's a great way with the ACLJ. And I just went over. There you go. All right. So we got Andy coming in. And
is that now on the homepage, the contact?
It's supposed to be, yes.
Let me check.
Look that up. So, again, if you're just joining us, headline from CNN, Supreme Court takes up First Amendment challenge to California abortion law. This is good, and this is important about
We'll take some calls when we come back.
We'll take calls when we come back. And also remember this, folks, an amicus brief it's called a friend of the court brief, but as Andy's going to describe, ours get reviewed and cited, but
heavily.
In this they get cited by the Supreme Court. But in this particular case, I think it's fair to say, Andy, even more important because we've got cases that are being held pending this. A number of them. So that makes whatever we say more important and whatever the court does more important.
Well, I think that's really a tribute to ACLJ. Through the years, we have been something that the court can look to and trust in terms of our analysis of the law and our recitation of the facts. And what we say counts in the Supreme Court of the United States. And I think that that's very important. And as I said, a tribute to the lawyers and to the reputation that we have built up in the Supreme Court of the United States.
Yep. So big news on that development. We'll keep you posted there. We're taking your calls.
Do you expect the U.S. government to take a side here?
I think they probably do. I think it's a big enough case where the administration will probably weigh in.
And that would be on
our
pro-life side.
I haven't talked to anybody, but I would think on the free speech side, yes.
Yeah, free speech, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the court can ask the court can ask the Solicitor General for their opinion. That could come out in the days ahead, or the Solicitor General can just do it.
Is there an acting or is there an official?
No, I think we have a.
He has been confirmed.
Yeah, Noel Francisco is confirmed.
He has been confirmed.
So he's back because he had to step away for a while, right?
Well, that confirmation battles are
When you're in acting, you have to step away when you're up for confirmation.
Yep. So, anyways, we're in good shape. All right,
and I think it'd be great to see Gorsuch.
So if you're just joining us, we've got news. Supreme Court takes up a First Amendment challenge to the California FACT Act. That act, by the way, requires pro-life crisis pregnancy centers to post a sign saying this is where you can get your free abortion. Our case, there's 4 cases now involved in it. The court took one of the cases, NIFLA versus Becerra. Our case, which was Living Well Medical Clinic, is put on hold. What that means is we'll file friend of the court briefs in favor of the other case. Whatever happens in that case will then directly impact ours, what's called a GVR. If we win on the top case, we then get a grant of the certiorari petition, a vacate of the lower court decision, and a remand to do it in accordance with the decision that would come out from the Supreme Court. So it's obviously we have a lot riding on it.
There's obviously legal implications here to our First Amendment, but there's those personal implications here as well. We get these calls often when this issue arises. And people get upset when they realize that these groups may not be able to do the work that they've been able to do. And Peggy in Ohio, I think, has a powerful story to share with everybody on line 3. Peggy, welcome to JSECO Live.
Hi, Peggy. Go ahead. You're on
the
air.
How are you?
Good.
Hi. I just wanted to call in and let everyone know that the price to be paid for these abortions does not come for free. There's a high price. I was an intended abortion. There was a woman that stepped in and talked my birth mother into keeping me. However, my birth mother did not raise me. This woman took care of me, but I'm here. We're a business owner. I'm a wife. I have 3 children. Both of my daughters are nurses, making a difference in people's lives. My son gave me a granddaughter.
Yep.
So I wouldn't be here. These people that are saying, that the unborn child doesn't have a voice.
Well, let me tell you something. First of all, Peggy, thank you for your statement. Thank you for your testimony on this. This is why we defend the life issue so aggressively. You're the Exhibit A of that. And now your children and grandchildren become the Exhibits B and C because this is why you fight for life. And, again, the idea that a pro-life crisis pregnancy center would be compelled to refer to abortions in writing on a sign when you walk in the reception area is repugnant to the First Amendment. Now, Andy Economou is with us, and we've worked a lot of Supreme Court cases together, Andy, for 30 years here, and we know that the repercussions on this one are going to be serious. So, again, the issue is there are actually 4 of these. I'm holding the cert petition in my hand for our television audience. There's 4 of these cases that are pending. They granted one, changed the question presented, so the question is strictly a free speech question. Does that California requirement of posting that sign violate the First Amendment? We will file an amicus brief with the Supreme Court, and then whatever happens in the case on top, the NIFLA case, will impact ours directly. But our amicus briefs get cited by the court.
Well, they do very, very truly indeed, because there is a great deal of respect in the Supreme Court of the United States for the American Center for Law and Justice, the caliber of legal analysis that we do, the way that we have consistently stated the facts correctly and properly. And I think, Jay, as you pointed out, the way the court has styled the question, I think, is very important. Is the free speech clause violated by the requirement that they post this absurd language that we have to tell people about an abortion? Does that violate the free speech clause?
So the exact language of the statute is California has public programs that provide immediate, free or low-cost access to comprehensive family planning, and then it says an abortion for eligible women. You have to publish that. You have to post it in your reception area. It has to be 8.5 inches by 11 inches and written in no less than a 22-point type. They tell you the size of the font. Then they say you have to also hand a printed notice to distribute to all clients in no less than a 14-point top. The question that the court granted review on is whether the disclosure required by the California Reproductive Fact Act violates the protections set forth in the Free Speech Clause of the First Amendment, applicable to the states through the 14th Amendment. The answer to that is, in our view, it clearly does. All right, we're taking your calls and comments at 1-800-684-3110. That's 800-684-3110. We're also getting comments coming in by Facebook and Periscope. Jordan, you want to take a call or a Facebook comment?
Yeah, we could take another call. I think this one is great, too, because Alexis has been involved with working at a crisis pregnancy center in Washington State. Alexis, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hey, Alexis, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hello. I want to qualify that this was 20 years ago.
Yep, the early days.
So in the early days, so that the things that we faced were not quite as critical as what is being faced now. I do want to say that many ads that were put in either newspapers or telephone books, by the way, on both sides of the aisle, would state clearly abortions, or non-abortion. So that would be in advertising absolutely made clear to begin with. The other thing is that the First Amendment free speech, I don't know. Your case is a wonderful case. I cannot speak to it legally. Hope and pray that there's a prevailing. But I want to say every woman who becomes pregnant, I don't care if she wants the child, is desperate to have a child. I would say 90% of all women are in a point of vulnerability the instant they find out that they are pregnant. Secondly, to assert that you have to be told about abortions, they begin school, and particularly rigorously in California, but in every state they begin to counsel the children about abortion in middle school through high school. Every single year they are told. They are taken to go get their abortions if they want to get their abortion. When a woman would ask us about is abortion an option, we would simply answer, we don't have that information. But
under California, so here's the thing. Under California, Andy, you're compelled to give them that information, which compelled speech can also be a violation, a violation Jay, of the First Amendment.
It's like someone going to a clinic to get relief from being a smoker. And there is a sign that the California state legislature has to be posted saying that you're available. Don't forget that you can buy cigarettes, or that there's a cigarette manufacturer that can put up a sign and smoke cigarettes. Why would you compel me to do something that is against my principles? Doesn't that violate my free speech? You're going to get help with respect to a pregnancy, and you're told absolutely you must say that you can get an abortion.
Yeah, and it's got to be in writing, handed to them, and publicly available. Now, the case is up at the Supreme Court of the United States. What that means is the main case, which is the National NIFLA versus BECRA case, is granted. The question presented, though, however, was not the question in any of the cert petitions, but more of the free speech language. I mean, we all had remnants of this. The question is whether the disclosures violate the First Amendment free speech clause. Our case will be held pending that, which means we'll file an amicus brief, and then we've got to go, and whatever happens in that top case will then impact ours. If we win on top, that means we get a GVR, grant, vacate, and remand. All right, we're here for another 30 minutes. We're going to be talking about this. We're going to talk about some international matters that are developing as well, and we'll take your calls and comments at 1-800-684-3110. Don't forget, if you need help, legal help in your community, whether Crisis Pregnancy Center or other organizations, we're getting a lot of calls coming in on the nativity scene issues. You go right to aclj.org. You can fill out a legal request for help right there.
I was going to tell people about that because we've actually put this is that time of year, especially where a lot of the Christmas displays and holiday displays come under attack by groups like Freedom from Religion Foundation. We wanted to make it easier for you to contact us and provide us the most information you can so that we can really get back to you quickly with one of our attorneys. So right on the top of aclj.org, it says Get Legal Help. You click on that, and then you'll see a form. So you fill in all that information as much as you can, and then we can contact you. And and that is a great way, folks. That goes straight to our attorneys. And then and again, folks, this is that time of year where we're ready to litigate. You got to get us the cases. aclj.org. If you need legal help, go there. Get legal help.
And don't forget our matching challenge campaign at aclj.org as well. Back with more in a moment. Will, what do we got coming up? So we're going to reset the show. We're going to talk about the other issues, too. And then we're going to try to do a segment on, let's make a call on that. What do you think?
I think that it would be good for our audience to hear a little bit of what the international things are going on. So
we're going to cover a little bit about the president's trip over to, this is important, the president's trip in Asia, but also some troubling UN resolutions. So we'll hit those. We'll talk about this as well, and we'll get it that way. We'll be joined by Wes and Harry in the next segment, I think is the plan, right? Okay. You have them both come in. That's fine at that time. All right, folks, don't forget our matching challenge campaign, aclj.org. Friends on Facebook, share this with your friends as we keep the conversation going. Here we go. All right. Again, aclj.org for that matching challenge campaign. And if you want to talk to us, 800-684-3110. We're going to hit a couple other topics coming up. All right, a lot going on Monday. Here's what we got. Supreme Court takes up a First Amendment challenge to a California abortion law. That's a case we've been talking about for a week. A week before last, we actually showed you. I'll hold it in my hand for our television audience right now. This is the cert petition we filed in our case. It is held. And what that means is they granted review in the case of NIFLA versus Becker. That was a case filed by our friends at the Alliance Defending Freedom. Our friends at the Liberty Counsel have filed a case as well. There's, I think, and the Pacific Legal Institute. So there's 4 of these pending at the Supreme Court. They grant one, hold the others, rewrote the question presented that it strictly focuses on the free speech clause, which I think is very good for our side, and that is whether this FACT Act, which requires pro-life crisis pregnancy centers to post in their waiting rooms and to hand to the women that here's where you can get your free abortion, which violates fundamentally this idea of compelled speech, which also fundamentally, Andy, violates the First Amendment.
It does. You should not have to say what the government tells you to say. That is not what the First Amendment provides, and this does not, and this applies both to the states through the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. The government, this is government-compelled speech. It violates freedom of speech. If you go into an abortion, rather into a crisis pregnancy center, and you're seeking counsel, you should not have to tell people that they must also seek abortion or have a right to abortion services.
I wanted to take Teresa's call from New Jersey online, too. Teresa's been holding on nearly 30 minutes. So let's get Teresa, before you hang up after your call, stay on and we'll get you a copy of our signed book. We appreciate you holding, and you're on the air.
Hey, Teresa, go ahead. You're on.
No worries. Hello, gentlemen.
Hi.
I really appreciate what you do.
Thanks.
I've been a pro-life counselor for 30 years. I live in New Jersey, and sadly, we just lost an election to a very pro-abortion governor. That is why this law in California is so important to our pro-life movement here in New Jersey, because it just seems to me that we mimic everything that goes on after it happens in California. And one thing, I heard the young lady mention what happens, if you do choose life and then you build a family structure, whereas they don't talk about the aftershocks and the problems that it caused. I've counseled many post-abortive women and literally talked them off the ledge and taken them to emergency rooms.
Well, you're at the front lines of that, but I want you to continue, because I did want to let you know that we've also got 2 cases now in New York that we're handling for EMC priced pregnancy centers, where, again, the government's coming after them as well. I think it's important if you could say this, Teresa, just from your experience, you've been a pro-life counselor, how important that counseling is.
Oh, it's extremely important. As a matter of fact, I had a girlfriend who was a nurse in an abortion clinic who ended up having to be high all the time and eventually took her own life. I mean, it's a brutal industry. We know so much more now than we used to. We can see that these are living human beings.
No question that imaging technology has changed the debate. But let me tell you something, and Jordan knows this, these pro-abortion groups try to shut down even the imaging capabilities that these centers engage in.
That's right. They don't want women who voluntarily seek out these pro-life pregnancy centers that do not provide abortions, that only exist to counsel women on one, if they are interested, if they're young and they're interested in a single mother kind of situation, there's not a father in the picture, or even if it's a young couple, what to do. They'll counsel that, of course, how to keep the baby. They have a lot of programs to help those moms who will have to definitely go to work to support. So they provide that service. They also provide the service, which I think is so important for our pro-life values to be on display for those of us to actually do something about it. For these crisis pregnancy centers to work, people have got to adopt. You've got to have people willing. We know there are. I mean, we all know there are people willing to adopt. They also will set that service up, which is invaluable for a young person in this situation to know that their child that they're carrying, this human being, which they may not be able to take care of right now in their life, will be taken care of and raised by a great family.
All right, we're going to take your calls when we come back at 1-800-684-3110. Again, Supreme Court grants review in a case got big ramifications for the pro-life community. We'll talk more about that. We've got some international matters we're going to address as well. And don't forget our matching challenge campaign at aclj.org. Lawfare. It's a term that describes exploiting existing legal systems to use as a weapon against one's opponents in an effort to damage or delegitimize them. In the context of Israel, this is an attempt to use international organizations, international tribunals, to do just that, delegitimize the Jewish state. I want to start with you, David. You're a military lawyer, but you've also worked on the lawfare issue because it's all related. And you talked about that. You said the first real issues with lawfare start on the battlefield.
The big story is human shielding, exposing their own civilians to harm by our forces. And then, on the one hand, achieving the benefit of deterring attacks from our side. And when attacks do take place, to use them, milk them for propaganda purposes and also in legal circles. So I think it begins there. We're in a situation where the international community basically buys into the idea that civilian casualties caused even in such a context are something that makes Israel into the bad guy. What they're doing is incentivizing more and more of that behavior on the part of Hezbollah, whether it's Hezbollah in South Lebanon or Hamas in Gaza.
The belligerents, if you will, really should be the people putting civilians in harm's way intentionally. It's not those who are defending themselves against that group, but it's the people like it's Hamas or Hezbollah and their commanders who are benefiting, and the people who go out and speak for them, who are saying, oh, look what's happened to these civilians. Why did you put the rocket there next to the school? That's the person that committed actually a crime against humanity by putting the child there, a minor there who has no decision point on this whatsoever. Those are illegal acts that the world has acknowledged as wrong or evil to the point where we would actually prosecute it. And yeah, it's turned around. But at a point, you can't just take the incoming. You have to respond.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the broadcast. We've got a lot going on. So we've talked about the Supreme Court granting review in the crisis pregnancy centers. We'll be filing amicus briefs on that. We'll let you know in the days ahead how you can participate in that. That will impact our case directly. We've got a case that's being held pending that case, the free speech question there. We also have a busy week in Washington. I'll be broadcasting from Washington tomorrow. And then Wednesday, we've got a hearing in front of the Helsinki Commission on Turkey and the situation with Pastor Andrew Brunson. So we've got a lot at play there. There's a lot of moves at the United Nations on the Israel front. So I want to take a segment to talk about kind of the international matter. I'm going to bring in Colonel Wes Smith and Professor Harry Hutchison joining us here in our media center. Let me go to Colonel Smith first. The president on the concluding day here of his trip to Asia. Give us kind of your highlights. You've served in South Korea, so you've been in the region. Sure. What's your sense of the trip?
It was, I think, the most significant trip that he has made thus far in his presidency. You know, when President Obama first came into office, he talked about a pivot to Asia that never happened, and he was never held to account for it. Without labeling it or calling it, President Trump met literally with every ally and every partner that we have in the Western Pacific. And so it was significant, both not only to trade, although that was talked about a lot, but also to national security and other strategic interests. By all accounts, it was a successful trip, and it was a true pivot to Asia. And yet, as I told you earlier, Jay, if you look at the mainstream media in America, it's like they were on a totally different journey. Yep. He is much more popular with foreign press and with people in foreign countries than he is with the U.S. media.
Yeah, well, the U.S. media, there was barely, it got coverage, but it was diminished, I would say, the coverage. What do you think the biggest takeaway is, Wes, from the trip so far?
I think on the positive side, he actually cemented relationships with all of our allies in that region. But I think it is significant that he has Japan and South Korea this week in a joint naval exercise with 3 U.S. aircraft carriers to counter the potential for North Korean aggression. You have to keep in mind, Jay,
we haven't had 3 aircraft carriers in that region for 25 years or something?
I think at least a decade.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing. When I lived in South Korea, one of the things I noticed, even though there's peace between Japan and the Koreas, and they cooperate, there is so much resentment and suspicion because of Japan, what they did to the Koreans before and during World War II. And the president has their militaries in a joint exercise together.
That's a pretty big deal.
Common defense. That is a huge deal. The other picture that stuck out in my mind, Jay, is seeing the presidential motorcade going down the streets in Hanoi, Vietnam.
Yeah, what a picture. Yeah, that was a picture. We've got that issue going on right now as the president comes back. Then, Harry, we have the United Nations about ready to launch its usual anti-Israel barrage. We thought initially 9 anti-Israel resolutions. Now we're talking about upwards of 20.
Absolutely. So, Jay, the United Nations continues its repugnant offensive against Israel. First, it continues to draft and pass anti-Israel resolutions. These resolutions, for instance, deny history. They attempt to confirm that Israel is an unlawful occupier, notwithstanding the Balfour Resolution and other documents which confirms Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state.
So you've got that, and then on Wednesday, so that's at the UN now, so our teams in New York and in Geneva are dealing with that. And Jordan, that is something we got to be constantly on guard with, and then we'll talk about what's coming up Wednesday. We've got more on this international front.
Yeah, that's right. So obviously when you're talking about these issues specifically with at the United Nations, you've got to be on your game because this is the one place where when you talk about the funding, when you talk about the mechanisms, the U.S. has a lot of power to flex, but you've got to do it quickly and you've got to use all the mechanisms. So sometimes you can do it through the Security Council and just issue a veto. Other times, you've got to kind of make threats, funding threats. Now, in a positive way, in a positive development, we've seen Ambassador Nikki Haley and the Trump administration not afraid of making those funding threats. And if they've had reports pulled that were against Israel already, they've done work like this before. Now, here, we're talking about resources, and I think that the U.S. has to flex its muscles to do the right thing for Israel.
So we've got the president finishing his trip. We're giving you analysis on that. Harry just gave you analysis of what we're facing at the UN and that our teams are working on that front, both in Europe and in New York. Then let's go to Wednesday in Washington, D.C., the Helsinki Commission. And the Helsinki Commission deals with religious liberty issues and freedom issues. And we've got the case of Turkey and Pastor Andrew Brunson. And our senior counsel, CC Heil, is going to be testifying before the Helsinki Commission. And that happens on Wednesday morning, Andy.
That's correct. The Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe. She will be testifying with respect to the terrible situation that has faced Pastor Andrew Brunson, who has lived in Turkey for 23 years, peacefully serving as a pastor of the Resurrection Church in Izmir, who a year ago, actually, to be precise, on November 15, the day that CC Heil will be testifying, will be 404 days. He was arrested as a threat to national security. He's literally been held with no accusations formally filed against him, not charged with any crime. His file has been sealed. Visits from his attorney are recorded. He can be held without formal charges for up to 7 years. No due process rights whatsoever, and some absurd contentions being made against him.
Yeah, so CC is going to be in front of the Helsinki Commission. That'll be chaired, I think, by the senator from North Carolina. That is where Andrew Brunson's family's from. That's taking place on Wednesday. So we got the Supreme Court granting review in the pro-life case today. We got the UN matter. We've got an analysis we've just given you on Asia. And then we've got this whole situation with Turkey. And I'm going to Harry on this. Harry, we've done a lot on Turkey. I mean, we've got a book about Turkey. We did our program at Oxford on Turkey. And this pastor, at this point, it's fair to say, is being held as a political prisoner.
Absolutely. And so, as we've suggested in the book, Jay, we have pointed out that Turkey has taken an authoritarian turn.
Yeah.
And so, increasingly, Turkey should be seen as an authoritarian state. Today, for instance, in Turkey, Turkey holds more journalists hostage in prison than any other state. And yet Turkey is a member of NATO. We are supposed to have good relations with Turkey.
Yeah.
But those relationships are beginning to evaporate.
So, Wes, NATO is supposed to be our ally. Colonel Smith, I will say this. So this is hard for people to understand globally how a NATO ally would be holding an American in this kind of situation.
It is unimaginable. And to think, I mean, any other NATO member that would be doing this to a U.S. citizen, there would just be worldwide shock. And there is some shock about this as well. Turkey is a very unpredictable and unreliable NATO ally. In addition to what Harry mentioned, right now, Turkey is cooperating with Russia and Iran as we continue to clear Syria of ISIS.
Yep.
And now, because Turkey is so much against the Kurdish forces that we're supporting, they are actually linking up with groups connected to Al-Qaeda. Turkey is linking up with them in order to push the Kurds out. And you know, Al-Qaeda is a terrorist group.
Jordan and Andy have been to Turkey. Andy's been multiple. Jordan, you know, describe Turkey. What kind of the atmospheres are? I know it's changed even since you all have been there.
Significant change since we were there. Already was beginning to change, but what was most noticeable at that time was that the Syrian conflict with ISIS was causing a mass influx of immigrants into cities like Istanbul, which is one of the largest cities in the world, and so you'd see many people on the street. I think at that time they'd already taken in 1 million refugees from Syria who had escaped ISIS. So again, on the humanitarian front, trying to help.
Yep.
The other hand, they have their own domestic terror issues with the Kurds, who we actually back as the United States in the war against ISIS. So it gets extra complicated. But Erdogan, since our visit, has cracked down significantly. So for someone like Andrew Brunson, who spent 20 plus years there, this all happened rapidly in a couple of years.
Yep.
It went from a place where I wouldn't go on the street corner preaching Jesus. And that's not what Pastor Brunson was doing.
Right.
But you could have a church and you could have a religious. We went to a religious service with the Pope and the Patriarch. I mean, so I mean, it was not like a place that prevented that. It protected us.
There have been restrictions of play in your denomination, Greek Orthodox. They have really cracked down on this.
Oh, severely, seriously. So, you know, you can't display the symbol of a cross on the outside of the church. You can't ring bells. This is not a free and democratic government that is really conducive to allowing people to exercise their religious freedoms. That's an absurd statement to say that about the Turks. And here they've put Pastor Brunson in a prison made for 8, and they had 22 prisoners in there, and he was the only Christian.
Yep. His hearing before the Helsinki Commission is Wednesday. Supreme Court today, tomorrow fighting at the UN, Wednesday Helsinki Commission. All right, we've got a segment left. 1-800-684-3110. Take a call on any of these topics that we've discussed. The issue involving the pro-life crisis pregnancy centers, Turkey, Korea. Your calls in this segment, we'll take them. 1-800-684-3110. We'll keep our panel here. We'll be able to talk those issues out with you as we continue. Busy start to the week, and I'll be broadcasting to you probably from Washington for a good part of this week anyways. 1-800-684-3110 if you want to talk to us. If you want to support the work of the ACLJ, aclj.org. That's aclj.org and our matching challenge campaign. Back with more in a moment. Interesting Facebook comments. Why is the state of California pushing this? That's from Bonnie on Facebook. California is the most aggressive in New York and California, the most aggressive to try to shut down. I mean, that's what they're trying to do, is shut down these crisis pregnancy centers.
In New York, they lost the pro-abortionists, the Planned Parenthood
won
lost.
in the Second Circuit.
What others? It's been Minnesota?
Second, fourth are the ones. The ninth ruled against us. Hawaii has a case right now. That'll all be stayed pending this. So all of this rides on this.
Was it Minnesota also?
I think there was a case in Minnesota. I don't know if it went to the Court of Appeals.
So there may not be a conflict, and they still took.
No, there is conflict. Second and fourth ruled in our favor, and the Ninth Circuit ruled against.
So the fourth was the fourth Minnesota?
No, fourth is not. Fourth is Virginia.
North Carolina.
Right.
I'm trying to think. I think there's one other state involved.
Yeah, but the fact is, I think they took it to grant our petition in our favor. So that was a good question that came in.
Yeah.
Elizabeth has this question. It seems for the pro-choice crowd, the only choice allowed is abortion. Elizabeth, you're absolutely correct, because that's the way they view it. So there you have it.
That's the only way they make money.
That's their business.
They don't make a lot of money saying, okay, have the baby.
Right.
That actually costs Planned Parenthood money.
All right, so we're going to do this. We got 2 lines open. So you could talk to us. If you got a North Korea question or Turkey, we're running questions about the president's trip, 1-800-684-3110, 800-684-3110, and we will take your calls and comments when we come back from the break. And don't forget, we got thousands of you on right now on Facebook and Periscope. Don't forget our matching challenge campaign, aclj.org for that. Any amount you donate, we get a matching gift for. Again, we encourage you to do that at aclj.org. And again, 2 lines open, 1-800-684-3110, and we'll take some phone calls. But I'll also tell you that plan is for me to broadcast from Washington at least Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. A lot going on there, and Cece's testifying on Wednesday. We need a breakthrough in that Pastor Brunson case, so we'll have more information about that. Here we go. All right, it's the last segment of the broadcast. You get to ask us questions on any of the topics we discussed. 1-800-684-3110. Let's go right to the phones. People have been holding.
Yeah, let me thank Beverly calling from Kentucky. She's been holding through our other discussions as well.
Too.
So, Beverly, after your question or comment, stay on the line. We'll get your information, send you a signed copy of one of our bestsellers. Beverly, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, Beverly. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Okay, hello.
Hey.
Mine is on the First Amendment. This is not part of the First Amendment. As a Christian woman, I do not want to walk in to a gynecologist or an obstetrician or a Planned Parenthood and be handed a brochure. I would be mortified.
Yeah, well, especially if you were walking into a crisis pregnancy center and they said, not only are you handed this is where you go get your abortion when you're trying to persuade the woman not to have the abortion, compelled speech, but they also post it. But here's the good news. The Supreme Court in the NIFLA case granted review, and they rewrote the question presented. So this is what the court wants the answer to. And, Andy, I think this is good for us. Whether the disclosures, this forced disclosure of where you can get your abortion, required by California's Reproductive Fact Act, violates the protections set forth in the Free Speech Clause of the First Amendment. The language, the question itself, I'll go to Harry and I'll go to Andy first and Harry, itself really sets this up, I think, very good for us.
The question does, and the answer, of course, to the question is yes, resoundingly so. And the Supreme Court wrote that question, and I think I know who the justices are who crafted the question. I won't say, but I think that it was drafted in such a way that they wanted to overturn these absurd rulings of these lower courts.
And he's going to make news here. He doesn't really know, but he's got we all have ideas when these things happen, how it works, because it kept getting delayed.
Yeah,
4 times it was brought before the court. So we were getting concerned that they were just going to deny it, but what they did was they rewrote it. But go ahead.
They did. No, the Supreme Court doesn't just frame a question willy-nilly and throw it together. They think about it very carefully, and they've put a lot of thought into the question, and I know what the answer ought to be at any rate.
It should be unanimous, although I'll take 5-4 right now, no questions asked. But the fact that they grant a review, Harry, it's a very good sign here.
Absolutely, and it's also important to note, as you have already noted, that they have crafted a particular question. Why? Because compelled speech is offensive under the rule of law and under the Constitution.
I was going to add this to it. I mean, could you imagine, Wes, you were a pastor. I mean, you were a colonel in the United States Army. You're a pastor. So if somebody came into you on this issue and you were talking to them about why it's important, keep the baby, you were trying to give a pro-life position, but the government, what's the difference between the government coming in to these crisis pregnancy centers or coming into your church and saying, hey, this is what you got to tell them?
There is no difference. I mean, on the face of it, it is just unbelievable that California has this law.
Yeah. The good news is, though, I think the grant was to vacate it. Let's take another call.
Yeah, let's go to Karen in Colorado on line 6. Karen, you've also been holding on a long time, so don't hang up after your question or comment. We'll send you a signed bestseller. Thank you for calling, Karen. You're on the air.
Hi, Karen.
Hello. How are you today?
Good.
Well, I was calling in because I wanted to share with everyone the pro-life and Planned Parenthood do not go hand in hand. At 16, I found myself with an unwanted pregnancy. And I didn't have a choice of anywhere to go. I didn't know what to do. Very confused and scared. So I walked into Planned Parenthood looking for resources and guidance on how I could help myself through this situation. And when I sat down with the counselors there at Planned Parenthood, I wasn't given resources, guidance, or options. They simply set me up with an appointment to have an abortion, guided me into that direction, and that procedure was done. To this day, I carry that guilt